We're working through all the free video tutorials on the Singer SE9180, and now it's time to go over the basics of threading this machine correctly. We're going to talk about the correct way to put the bobbin in and use the needle threader. Yes, I know you have a quick little reference guide for how to get started, which I love, and it's all in color. And do keep this close by until you've done this enough times to really understand what they're having you do. Your manual, we'll put a link below in the description that you can reference. It is an online manual, but you can print off pages that you need or print off the whole thing. But yes, I know they don't put manuals in, but that helps keep the cost down. Trust me, most manuals just get thrown away. Okay, but I think when people want to learn about threading, they're more apt to actually watch a video. Now, as we've gone through the accessories, go ahead and pull out a bobbin, and we'll put links below to where you can find more bobbins. As we discovered, there's only 4 bobbins that come with this machine, and you're going to want some more. I do find most of my students, when we took a poll, use about 10 bobbins minimum for sewing and like to have up to 10 for embroidery. And when we get to winding bobbins and talking about embroidery thread, when we're embroidering, you'll learn more about that. And thread, speaking of thread, you can't just put any old quality of thread in this machine. I will tell you, when you use better quality thread, you're going to get better results. So if you've got old thread from grandma's old sewing box, maybe that's not what you want to use on this wonderful machine. Let's find some maybe newer from this century thread that you purchased brand new. I'm going to be using this cotton thread from Metler for our sewing videos, and I will be using an Isacord embroidery thread, which is actually a polyester. I am a fan of polyester versus rayon because it is stronger for when we do our embroidery videos. Now, I often, when I need turquoise, for example, I'll be putting and using this in my sewing machine as well. So if you don't want to buy like different kinds of thread, buy good quality embroidery threads. Now, just because it's a good price does not mean it's always the best quality. So if you have some trouble with threading or thread breaking, I'm going to give you lots of tips in all these videos of what could be going wrong and what to check and change. But when you start out with quality embroidery thread, I will tell you it makes all the difference in the world. So for today, like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and use a good quality cotton thread. And when we look at the top of the machine, you're going to notice everything is numbered, like how and when to go through which area next. Is like following a little path. And there are dotted lines for when we actually are winding a bobbin. So that is one thing that you'll always be able to like have on your machine. You don't have to go looking for it. The other thing before we totally get started is let's make sure your presser foot is up. So you can reach behind the machine and lift it up. It kind of comes up in the middle. So, or you can just take your right hand and lift it up. But it needs to be up for when we thread the machine. So I'm actually just making sure I don't forget to tell you right now to have that in the up position. Now, when you put your spool on, doesn't matter if the thread is coming off the back side or the front side. Just go ahead and slide it on. But you are going to want to find a spool cap that matches the size of spool you're using. For example, mine is a little bit kind of wider, so I'm using like the medium size. And I'm going to push it on all the way so there's no gap between the spool and the little spool cap. As I'm coming across, you're going to find that all the guides are nice and open, so you can just slip it in or hook it around. You'll notice I'll use 2 hands often. And then one of the most important part is right here. You can kind of feel with your finger this little tension disc or button. It is kind of spring loaded. So when we put our thread underneath here, you need to make sure it goes in underneath it and kind of clicks in. So if it just goes around here kind of softly, when you go to wind your bobbin, you're going to get a very loosely wound bobbin, and then that just doesn't look right. And then when you go to use it, it's also not going to play nicely with the machine. So just keep that in mind. Every time you thread the machine, whether you're doing the threading or a bobbin, it goes into that first little guide right here, as well as the guide directly past or in front of the spool. So 2 places are always used when, no matter what you're threading. Let's come around that little pre-tensioner. Listen to the click as I click it in. Click, it's really light, but I can tell there's a little resistance in there now. Next, you can take your bobbin and actually just put it directly on the bobbin winder. Doesn't matter which way is up or down. There's not a right or wrong. After you push the bobbin onto the spindle, make sure it goes all the way down into the base. Push it all the way over to the bobbin winder first. Next, wrap the thread around the bobbin in the direction of the picture, and then look for the little groove at the base where as you slip that in and give it a little pull, it will cut. So that was the little leftover end that cut it off. And then step on the foot control and it'll just start to wind. You'll actually notice that as you step on your foot control and with a tap, it will start to wind, and then another tap will actually stop it. So you don't actually have to hold your foot on the foot control for it to continue to fill up. So you can kind of wander off. So let's watch what happens as it gets a little fuller. It will stop winding once it becomes to the fuller setting here. You just want to make sure that it doesn't go past the edge of the bobbin, which most of the time it doesn't. But if it does, that's just a little adjustment in here if you need to. But see how it slows down and then stops spinning? Tap your foot control, and then that way it's going to stop. Go ahead and slide the bobbin away and use some scissors to detach the bobbin from the spool. Let me show you a little trick. When you're done winding the bobbin and you pull straight up, this is the same position that you're going to drop it into the bobbin case. So let's go ahead, slide the little button to the right. This pops the little door off. Make sure that you always have your door because you're going to need to cover that up once you have placed your bobbin in here. So yes, there is a right and wrong way to put a bobbin in, but if, like I said, if you just lift straight up and drop it straight down, you're going to notice there's a little picture right here on the front of the machine of which way the thread has to come off this machine. I am a fan of machines with this little kind of S shape because once we drop the bobbin in, we take the thread, come underneath following the little arrow. I sometimes like to put my finger on the bobbin right here, and you can kind of feel it clicking into the tension, and now it's a little tighter. Take the thread, follow it around the top part here, down at the bottom, and see where the arrow changes directions? Right here's a cutter, and it cuts the thread to the perfect length that all you have to do is put the cover back over the bobbin area, and you don't have to bring your bobbin thread up when you start to sew. It's cut to the perfect length for when you start to sew. It will pull it up naturally. And the last thing we need to do is thread the machine. Once again, just make sure your presser foot is still up, and we need to undo this little bobbin pre-tensioner. That part is not in use when we're threading the machine. So you put your thread on with the right spool cap. You come under the first guide and the second guide, so you can just leave the thread in there. And then watch this. I'm going to actually be threading the machine probably more with my left hand these days, and I'm holding the thread up here at the top with my right hand. And as I come down, what I want to do is just make sure that all the thread gets deep enough into this first groove. And what you can do is give it a little floss and make sure that it goes into the tension disc. Now, this is the place where people get in trouble. So if you take the time to kind of practice flossing, and this will come into play when you are embroidering, because you're going to be changing colors for, you know, a 5-color embroidery design. You're going to change threads 5 times. So if you get the hang of correctly threading every single time, this will cause less trouble all the way through. Now, so we've come down where it says number 3. We're coming up where it says number 4. Come in on the right and down on the left, and you've cut up here in the little take-up lever, and then we're going all the way down to the needle. There is one guide at the top of the needle right here, open on the right side. So make sure that your thread comes all the way around that next. The way the needle threader is going to work is there's a little kind of hook that you're going to catch. And on the side of the machine right here, there's a lever that as you pull down, it will come all the way down. Bring it all the way down so that little head wraps around the eye of the needle, and then you're going to bring the thread into the little groove, then twist it away from the needle and let that little loop get pulled through the back of the needle eye, and then you'll reach in and pull that right on out. Let me show you that at a slightly different angle. once threaded, take the top thread and go down underneath the foot through the little groove and just out to the back side. Take some fabric, fold it in half. 2 layers is going to be ideal for testing. So anytime I'm like just doing a little test stitch out to make sure everything is working correctly before I do my project, I'll just take a piece of fabric, fold it in half. So don't just sew on 1 layer, it makes a difference. Let's put our fabric in, lower the presser foot. We're on a straight stitch number 1, and let's go ahead and do some stitching. So how do we know that everything is working correctly? So number 1, everything sounds nice and smooth. We can use the scissor button to go ahead and cut our thread. Lift up the presser foot, and what we want to look for is that we have the same looking stitch on the front as we do on the back. So it really shouldn't be able to be identified if I sewed from this side or this side. That's when you know you're balanced. If you're using good quality thread in your needle and you have the same thread in your bobbin, that's about all you need to do. Just pick your stitch and away you go. Now, a lot of people ask me about tension. So tension is more when you have like different weights of thread, or one of the threads is really pulling more to the top or the back side. But here, let's just make sure that we leave the tension at 4. That's kind of the happy middle for this machine. And we will get into when to adjust tension, but we'll also go through like what other things to look for. Like, did the bobbin go in upside down? Did we thread the machine correctly? Did we do that little flossing technique that I just showed you about making sure you are getting it all the way deep enough into the tension discs right here before we start to sew? And a little trick for that is actually if you pull on this thread, if the foot is up and it pulls gently out, great, it is correct. And then when you lower the presser foot, if it's tight, that means everything is where it should be and you should be ready to stitch successfully. So again, if you're having trouble with your stitch, make sure you're using the right needle, maybe change to a better quality thread. If you've used this machine for a while, it might be time to check out the video for cleaning and maintenance, and that will make sure that everything is running nice and smooth, just like it should. Check out all the videos in the playlist that we have in the description below, and make sure that you click like on this video so we can continue to make more content on other machines in the future.